It's Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods. Or
6:06 the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. It is a Friday, and I'm glad you made it with a lot to cover. In fact, I was looking at what I have to cover today and talk to you guys about, and I'm realizing there's no way I'm getting to all of this. It's just not going to happen. But that's okay. It is every day I give you some kind of open phones. It's going to happen. On Fridays, it's the entire program. So at any point there's anything you want to talk about, you can interrupt me. That's fine. 888-97 was the phone number, 888-97. WOODS. So, all right, real quick, good news. On Fridays, I like to start you with some good news, but this I think you'll like. For those people who have just been real sick and tired of all of the smoke in the area, there's some improvement today. Not perfect. It's hazy in some areas, but wind directions have changed a little bit, and there's even a little bit of a breeze out there. Now, I experienced it. I'm in Cheyenne right now at the studios of KGAB, and when I drove down here, I experienced a little bit of that. It's not a wind, it's a breeze. And even now when I look outside the windows here in downtown Cheyenne, Wyoming, there's a little bit of movement in the trees. That's blowing the smoke more of a easterly direction. So our apologies to Nebraska and South Dakota, because they're in the thick of it right now, and it's our fault. For those people who hate Nebraska and South Dakota, well, okay, screw them. I'm with it. Okay, fine. But no, sorry guys, we're sending you all of our smoke right now. Now, that doesn't mean it's perfectly clear in Wyoming, but it is better than we've experienced for a while. Now, big fire is still burning. In fact, people in Gillette are still in a little bit of a thick of it. If we head toward Wright, Wyoming, and Sundance, you still have a bit of a problem there. And some of that is, coming from the fire in the Bighorns, that elk fire. Now, we head on over to the fire up in Toketee Pass. That smoke is being blown up and away, so even Du Bois is going to have a little bit of, and people downwind from Du Bois is going to have a little bit of a relief. Perfect? No. This is not going to be perfect, but it's better than it has been in the past few days. Now, on that note, I wanted to update you guys on something. And that was an interesting story we had a couple of day or two ago. So friends of mine in I love Chugwater, Wyoming. I mean, just a cute little town with some great people in it. And friends of mine from Chugwater started sending me pictures and video of the fire that was heading toward Chugwater. And the big question was, well, how did that start? Where did that come from? And at the time, they didn't know. So when I head down to Cheyenne, I always stop by Chugwater. I grab they have this really great bacon cheeseburger, and there's a house burger that they have, which they put some special seasoning in, which is really good. So I have that every time. And I talk to the owner and the cook down there, and then I cross the street, which is over by the Tri-County Mercantile. And by the way, side note on that, I've been crossing that street to visit my friends at the Mercantile for quite a few years. And then back to my car, which I usually park in front of the soda fountain. And there's really never any traffic on that. It's an old back highway. There's really hardly ever any traffic on it. And so usually I just walk across, don't worry about a thing. I'd gotten so used to just walking back and forth, I barely even look both ways, which is bad news. Earlier this year, I was walking across, and suddenly I stopped and jumped back. And there's hardly ever any traffic on that road. There was a big semi-truck hauling 6 cars. So I just about, after never having to be worried at all about ever getting hit by any vehicle, I almost got creamed by a semi-truck and 6 cars at the same time. What a way to go. Anyway, I crossed the street, and I talked to some people over there as well. What happened with the fire? And they gave me the whole lowdown. So here's the drill. Here's what happened. And this was just we can call it a stupid mistake, an innocent mistake. I'll let you guys figure that out. Here's what happened. When you're north of Chugwater, which is on the other side of the bluffs there is a ranch. and somebody at the ranch decided to burn some trash. Yeah, I know. Right away I hear the groans out there. Are you kidding me? Well, yeah, it is so dry out there. Why would you burn trash? In fact, I was even thinking, I go with a group of friends camping every so often during the course of the summer. And if I were to go right now with them, I would say we're not having a fire. Forget it. It's just so dry out there. So somebody at the ranch wants to burn some trash. Well, of course, some of the embers drift away, and it doesn't take much with as dry as the grass is. And that gets up into the hills, which is the south side of the ranch, the hills leading up to the buttes. And that starts the grass on fire. Now, the Chugwater Fire Department, the reason Chugwater, Wyoming has their chili cook-off every single year is this is how, and it's a very popular event, which I get to host that every year. I love that. It's a really popular event which has music and the chili cook-off and all sorts of other things going on. And then they have a rodeo afterwards. And that's all to raise money for things in town, including their fire department. That's why they have one, because they have that chili cook-off. Well, that fire department swung around the corner to the ranch to try to put it out, but it was already climbing up and over the buttes. So they're trying to fight it up there, and it is getting way out of control really fast. It's too much for them. It's just moving too fast. So they call in for help, and that's where the smaller planes, you used to seeing these planes, they're often called air tractors. There's another name for them too. But usually these are the planes that you see that are crop dusters. You're familiar with them. But they're also used for fighting fires. So a squadron of them, if you call it that, come flying in, and they're dropping that slurry, which is that red fire retardant that they drop, in front of the blaze to try to get it to stop. By then, it had moved across the top of the bluffs and was coming down the side of the hill toward Chugwater. Now, thankfully, the interstate's there. So 4 lanes of the interstate makes for a pretty good buffer. But still, they're worried about it jumping. If it jumps the interstate and starts heading into town, the little town of Chugwater is pretty much just screwed. And people in town were watching this going, okay, this is getting really close. Well, the fire department, along with those airplanes, were able to stop the fire right at the interstate. So as I drove in yesterday, at some point, I drop off the highway and I take a little back road into Chugwater just because I like driving that little back road. Well, I decided not to do that this time. So I drove into down the interstate so I could see where the fire was. And there's a sign there for the Stampede Restaurant. The sign is singed. That's where the fire stopped. I just wanted to get a good look at where it was, and it stopped right there. So, all right, that's what happened in Chugwater, all because somebody decided to burn some trash, and it got out of it surprised everybody how fast that moves. I mean, honestly, how fast a fire like that will move through grasslands. And if the grass is high enough, how high and how hot it can get. So now you know why the fire in Chugwater started yesterday. And I'm telling you this because I got a lot of questions after I posted the article, along with the pictures and the video that were sent to me by the people in Chugwater as to, what was happening that day with the fire and the fact that Chugwater became really close to having a major problem, but they didn't. And so thankfully the fire department was there, and thanks to the guys in that team, that squadron of airplanes that flew over and bombed it with slurry to stop it just before. Don't burn trash right about now. And if you want to camp this weekend, which ought to be a beautiful weekend for camping, don't start a fire. It's just not the time to do it. 6:15 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
Got something to say to Glenn? Use the chat on the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app and get your opinions straight to the studio with K2 Radio.
6:22 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. All right, 888-97 was the phone number. That's 888-97-WOODS. A couple more things on the fire side. So, and these are headlines, good headlines from Cowboy State Daily. I'll give them credit for that. First one is fast-acting YDOT worker spots new wildfire, calls 911, then helps put it out. Oh, we got to touch on that story. That's good. Also, I like this one. Elk fire breaks the rules of wildfire, is behaving like a teenager. Okay. I can say that because how many teenagers are up right now listening to this program? Maybe one. That's about it. So the first one, and there's a picture of this guy, and he's looking all innocent and so on, and this fire looks, it's a grass fire. It looks pretty bad, but all right. Quick thinking helped to avert a Wyoming wildfire catastrophe about 7 miles north of Sheridan near the Acme exit Interstate 90. And whenever I think of the Acme expert, right away, the exit there, and yes, they had an Acme plant there, and yes, I think of Wile E. Coyote. Of course I do. Wyoming had an Acme plant. I don't know what they created for the Coyote, but they did. All right, anyway. Jacob Wilson, Wyoming Department of Transportation District 4 workers spotted a plume of smoke near the Acme Inspection Center. I can only assume that it was another yet Acme product that went awry. That's the best I can think of because, I mean, you know, nothing the Coyote ever used worked. So, all right, he was heading back to his office to finish up some paperwork about 1:30 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. And he said, quote, the smoke really lays in the valley where the elk fire is so bad, so it's hard to tell visually what's new and what's old. But that day, the wind came through. It had blown the elk fire smoke out of here, and so he sees this new plume. So good thing the wind had changed direction, and he saw the new plume. That made the little plume clearly visible, and it had Williamson immediately worried. And Sheridan County had been without rain for more than 20 days now. Things are so dry, brown, the slightest spark. And that's what I explained to you if you missed it in the last segment. What happened in Chugwater when someone was burning trash. One little spark right now. So I was like, I better come over and see what's over here. And he did. And once he turned the corner, he could clearly see the fire. The first thing he did was call 911 and report the fire. Then he went looking for fire extinguishers from his truck. He started with that. I couldn't find it. I turned on my safety lights and hauled my butt back to the job site. S&S Builders crew, contractor working on a bridge out there, and picked up some fire extinguishers. Within a few minutes, he was back, hopped the fence, and he was trespassing, and started doing that. By now, the tiny fire was really big. Fire extinguishers didn't do a whole lot. I didn't think they would, but it was worth a shot. Really only taking a couple of minutes for the fire extinguisher to be empty. The fire was going so fast, he was just one guy in blue jeans, so he called Hillbilly Hotshot. I talked about these guys yesterday. Now, the fire department, they're trying to get there, but they're overwhelmed, as you can imagine. The Hillbilly Hotshots are some guys self-named guys in the area that they own property and they have enough money to go ahead and get some of their own equipment, is the short story. And they already have some stuff anyway. I mean, you've seen ranchers driving around in a pickup truck with a big tank of water on the back. I mean, that kind of stuff, plus other equipment that they have. So they showed up. Okay, so the term is generally referred, the story says, to those who outfitted their trucks with tanks of water, determined to patrol neighborhoods and put out anything they see popping up that the fire department can't get to because, you know, they're so busy with, especially Forest Service, because they're so busy with big fires. William told Cowboy State Daily he was proud to become a member of the informal crews. And there's a picture, a really good picture of these guys going around working and putting out the fire. And that helped a bit. And rodeo boys came running. The story says the heat was incredible. It talks about how they fought it with water, but also there's a lot of digging going on, shovels, stuff like that, to make a fire break. Fire may have been caused by a cigarette, the story says. So that's where I get into, just like in Chugwater, some guy decided, I'll burn some trash. Don't, not now. They think someone threw a cigarette butt out. Oh, for the love of God, people, don't. Then there's the other story that they have here. Elk fire breaking the rules is behaving like a teenager. I love that title. Again, Cowboy State Daily. But not the elk fire burning in northern Wyoming. Now it's more than 76,000 acres in a perimeter of about 225 miles. The fire has been a much different beast. Quote, this thing is behaving like a teenager, Field Operations Chief told a crowd of nearly 500 people in Story, Wyoming. I wonder if there are any teenagers present to hear him say that. Anyway, what if he had said behaving like a teenage girl? So you know it's bad when the fire is behaving like a teenager, but if it starts behaving like a teenage girl, we are really screwed. And I would normally say with all due respects to teenage girls, but no. So they gathered at the Bighorn High School gymnasium, filling all of the seats. Quote, most fires are up all day and all night. Then they run uphill, not down. But the elk fire is going downhill in the middle of the night. It creates multiple challenges for firefighters on the lines where the fire is 15% contained, which is not much. One, we can't see at night, so we have a hard time, whether it's our heavy equipment, engines. So they have to fight this thing day and night, and they just can't keep up with this because it's going so many different directions at once. All right. We're coming up on 6:30. Local news is coming your way. After local news, update on your weather forecast. You and I get back into it. I will have the extended weather forecast with Don Day at 6:45. Which does have next week some changes that we need when it comes to these fires. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
Local and mobile across Wyoming and beyond with the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app. This is AM 1030 K2 Radio.
6:36 the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. It is a Friday, and that means you made it. So I was talking about fires this morning. Hello, Miss Mary. Miss Mary are getting together with our connection that we text each other on. So, okay, we are connected now. Good. I believe, right? Okay. So, since we're talking about fires, I was wondering this morning, how much have we really spent on fires? Because just to get firefighters down here, and even just the ground guys, then the air guys, wow, they're really expensive. And we have spent a lot of money and time on fighting fires in Wyoming. Now, if you think we have it bad, go take a look at the fires in Idaho. Oh, we have, compared to them, we have no business complaining, but they have some major fires up in the mountains in Idaho. So how much does it cost Wyoming? All right. So Oil City News, they write, speaking to members of the media on several topics Thursday, Governor Gordon said that the unprecedented amount of acreage burned by wildfires this season has consumed the state's budget fighting them. Quote, we expended our firefighting biennium budget at this point. That's a 2-year budget. Governor said that, noting that the state is now borrowing from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Fund. So in other words, that Legislative Stabilization Reserve Fund, pretty much basically the money that we just set aside in reserve for emergencies. This would be considered an emergency. Gordon also worried that future fire seasons will be similar. He said, I'm working with fellow governors to make sure the U.S. Forest Service understands that this is not as unique a year as we would like, and that we need to make sure that we have resources under all circumstances. Said he's concerned with federal agencies. They'll be downgrading its investment in fighting costly fires. Here's a thought for everybody, state government and federal government. I tell you what, quit spending money on we need to get into this next hour, and I think I will, because it's an important topic. I have a lot of topics lined up for you today, but this is an important one. When it comes to disasters, and no, we're not having more than ever before, bigger and badder and climate change and yada, yada. It just, some years are busier than others. We have some very quiet years. Last year, it was green all through the summer and into the fall. We got rained on like crazy. It was great. But then this year was incredibly dry. It changes from year to year. But rather than spending money on all sorts of useless projects, how about putting money aside for important things, and this would be one of them. The elk fire at the edge of the Bighorn Forest near Dayton and Ranchester has burned 76,000 acres since it started 2 weeks ago. Overnight, it crossed Big Goose Creek, which is a watershed city for the city of Sheridan. Fire crews there have been preparing for the advance by clearing out material. It talks about how they are doing this, but this is very expensive. And as I said, it's not just a matter of the men we have on the ground. Last I heard, we had like something like 900 men, I think, up there. And we can get more than that. And then you got to consider all the air power called in, which is really expensive. Meanwhile, the Pac Trail fire, Teton National Forest, has burned over 67,000 acres since September 15th. Is once again 0% contained. Over 1,400 people are actively fighting between those two fires. Gordon said the house straw fire earlier this summer became the second biggest in the state history in a matter of days, 175,000 acres. And it talks about the causes for that and so on. But mainly it's just a matter of how much money does all of this cost us. And I understand completely the governor's concerned about, well, we need to make sure that we set money aside for this. And I agree, we do need to make sure that we set aside money for this. Then when we look on the East Coast, had some hurricanes, one after the next up there. Problem in the Appalachian Mountains. Florida has problems mostly on its East Coast right now, but Florida has a lot of problems. It's going to get expensive because they were hit one after the next. And so when we look at problems, and FEMA runs out of money. Well, FEMA got plenty of money to handle all of this. Yesterday, I gave you guys a story about FEMA, how we are still paying, we shouldn't be, but for disasters that happened 20, 25 years ago, and FEMA is still dumping money into it. And those disasters were over and settled a long time ago, and yet we're still dumping money into this. So, that's yet another reason why we need to start taking a serious look at our budgets, state budgets and federal budget, and what we spend money on. Here's an idea. Let's not spend $10 million in a shooting complex that should be done by private enterprise. Instead, let's spend that money on what happens when we have the next big fire season or whatever other disaster might happen. And we need some money in reserve for things like this. All right. Like I said, I think this is really important, so let's get into it more next hour. But speaking of that, weather forecast, some changes are coming next week that will help us out. 642. Wake Up Wyoming.
So many opinions, we had to build the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app to hold them all. Free download from AM 1030 K2 Radio.
6:49 is the time. It's Woke Up Wyoming. It's Frank Gambino's standing by waiting to talk to us. Frank, I got a note for you. You're going to have to translate it for me. I'm not sure what this is.
All right, I'll do the best I can here.
It's from Big Red. He's out in Hawk Springs.
Yeah.
Tell Frank he needs one of those 6-foot dune buggy flags. You know, it's kind of you see on some pickup trucks around here?
Yeah.
He didn't come say hello to the ambulance crew, so I tried to find him. No luck.
Oh, at the game yesterday.
Yes.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Those people at Southeast High School, they were cooking up a storm.
Yeah.
You smelled that right when you drove into the parking lot.
So Frank was where the food was.
It was clouds of
Incredible.
smoke, and you can smell that meat. It just kind of drew you over there. And I guess the local bank put this on. But
okay,
I mean, they were cooking up a storm.
Okay, did you enjoy some of that food?
No, because the line was too
long. Yeah, I think you're like me on this. Don't do lines, but okay. I think what he's getting at here is here's somebody who's looking.
I was on the other. There's two sidelines. I was on the sideline where Lingo Fort Laramie was.
Yeah.
And then when I walked in, I was on the southeast, part of that, and I said hello to a few people. But and I apologize for missing people. That's all right.
Well, a lot of people know what you look like, but what if I got you a really fun sports-like hat that had a flag on it so people could find you?
Well, I have a Wild Preps hat, but I wore my University of Wyoming cowboy hat.
Oh, okay, yeah. People need to see you in uniform. Okay, go with sports.
All righty, the high school football to the max statewide tonight, and in Casper, it's the 60th annual Oil Bowl, as Kelly Walsh will host Natrona. Both teams are 3-3 on the year, hunting for a home playoff game in 4A. Now, Kelly Walsh has not won the Oil Bowl since 2016, and both teams have lost to all three of the really good teams in 4A, but there is a lot to play for. It's one of the best events in Casper. End of story. So that's a 6 p.m. start at the Harry Galdine Stadium. The Capital Bowl is tonight in Cheyenne, as Cheyenne East will take on Cheyenne Central, and East will host that game. East is 5-1, and Central is 1-5. Laramie will be in Cheyenne as well. They'll take on Cheyenne South. Laramie could really use a win to enhance their playoff chances in 4A football. Campbell County will take on Thunder Basin up in Gillette, and Sheridan will play Rock Springs, and that game will be played in Casper at 6 p.m. over in the Natrona County High School due to all the smoke in the Sheridan area from that fire. In 2A football, Glenrock at home to take on Bighorn. Glenrock is 0-6 on the year, Bighorn 5-0. And Burns at 3-3. They will host Upton Sundance tonight. In 9-man football, a big game as 2 5-0 teams will hang out. It'll be Pine Bluffs hosting Saratoga. In 1A 6-man this afternoon, Matitzi at 3-1 will be at KC, and the Bucks come in at 1-4. Then tomorrow, Midwest at 4-1 will take on Riverside. And in college football coming up tomorrow, the Wyoming Cowboys will host San Diego State in War Memorial Stadium in Laramie. Cowboys are 1-4 overall and 1-0 in Mountain West Conference play after beating the Air Force 2 weeks ago, but they're coming off their bye week. So generally speaking, out of these bye weeks, you can look at it two ways. If the Cowboys come out sharp on Saturday, then it's like they're rested and fresh and everything else. And if they come out listless, that means they're rusty after not playing for a week. You pick it out. Cowboys need to force turnovers, need a balanced offense, and they have a lot of injuries to deal with, but this is a winnable game for them as they're only a 2-point underdog, and that's a 1:30 start from War Memorial Stadium tomorrow. We'll have that for you on K2 Radio in Casper and KOWB in Laramie. Denver Broncos will be at home on Sunday to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are 2-2 and have lost 2 in a row. The Broncos are 3-2 and have won 2 in a row. In the baseball playoffs, the New York Yankees eliminated Kansas City in the American League best-of-5 series, one of them at least, 3-1 with a 3-1 win yesterday. Cleveland beat Detroit 5-4, so that American League series is even at 2 games apiece. The 5th and deciding game will be tomorrow, and the 5th and deciding game of the National League playoff series between San Diego and Los Angeles will be tonight. That's it in sports.
So UW has this, everybody.
I think so, yes.
Got it. Yeah, okay.
I'd be the first person to tell you that there's probably some teams they cannot beat,
right,
but this is one that they can.
They can. Okay, so and they've been rested, so there's no excuse here.
Unless they come out rusty.
Right. Now, I would say no pressure, guys, but pressure, guys.
This is a very important game for them.
All right, thank you, Frank. 6:54 is the time coming up on local business, news, national, local update on your weather forecast. It's Wake Up Wyoming. Sure. The time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. My name is Glenn Wood. Thanks for joining me on Friday, and you made it. And weather-wise, for most everybody, it's going to be a good-looking Friday out there, including a little bit of a breeze that blows enough of that smoke out so it almost doesn't suck out there. Now, that's still a problem for people, Gillette, Wright, Sundance, and even up in, of course, Sheridan itself, with the fire you have there, and also those people way over around Togety Pass, they still have a problem. Although a lot of that smoke is going to be blown up into the mountains around here, not right into the pass. So that's better anyway. 7:45, I'll have Don Day on. We'll talk about the weather, which we have a few more days of this, but sometime next week, there's a bit of a change. Definitely cooler temperatures. Even a slight possibility of wet that we could use. So we'll wait and see. I'll talk to Don Day about that. He's a bit hesitant, but he had a little bit of encouragement anyway for sometime next week for that. For those who missed the first hour of the program, the story is up on the Wake Up Wyoming site. You can go and read about the fire in Chugwater, what started it. Because I was talking to people in Chugwater yesterday, and they told me the whole deal about how that fire got started and how it was put out, which turns out to be a really interesting story. about where that came from. Also, first hour this morning, told a great story about a guy who's up in the Sheridan County area who saw just a guy who saw a fire start out in the prairie and ran over there to put it out, along with others out there that are sort of just a makeshift quick volunteer fire department. Just a bunch of guys with ranches out there who put their own little team together for when the Forest Service isn't able to get to them, but they can do just a little hotshot fires. They did a fantastic job, too. Now, on that note, and I was talking about this last half hour, but I want to continue on and get your thoughts on that, too. So 888-97-WOODS, the phone number. That's 888-97-WOODS. Stories from Oil City News, and it talks about the governor who had a meeting with, in general, with the public, and there were a lot of people at the meeting, and he talked about how much money we've spent on these fires this summer. Now, first off, let me back up to be real clear about where all of this is coming from. With any weather or fire, of course, fire is caused in part by the weather, obviously. We've had some hurricanes in the country this summer. There's always good years and bad years. Remember, last year at about this time, we were still amazed that most of the prairie was green. Reservoirs that had been emptying out across the country were filled within a season. We had an incredible winter that filled reservoirs all across the West, and it just kept raining all summer long. I remember in the middle of summer, driving across Wyoming, and wow, look, it's green out there. There's flowers out there. We usually don't have that in the middle of summer, and yet there it was. And the next year, we started off pretty good, but then we hit this dry patch, which has been going on for quite a while. And so now everything's just tinderbox out there. And so any little thing starts a fire, right? Not just lightning. Any little thing starts a fire about now. That's been our problem out west. Wyoming, we've had a lot of fires, but you go over to Idaho and damn. I mean, they really have some mountain fires. Now, the governor said we can expect this kind of stuff to happen more often. And my answer to that is, well, it depends what year you're talking about. Because like with anything, there are busy years and not busy years. As an example, let's go over again to where I grew up over on the East Coast. I'm a Florida boy, as you know. And for everybody who's been asking, my family moved off those islands a while ago when my parents did, when they retired, and my sisters live outside of there. Everybody except my brother-in-law got out of the state, and he's fine. He just stayed there to take care of the house. They live in the center of the state. They're fine. Having grown up in a hurricane zone, I can tell you, we'll go through a long period of time when we won't have that many storms. Not a lot happens. Then suddenly we hit a year where, like this year, all of a sudden it got really active. Now, we still have had very few hurricanes this year. I know that sounds surprising, but we've actually had very few hurricanes this year. What happened is 3 in a row all pretty much hit within the same area. I mean, boom, 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 one after the next. Other than that, there really hasn't been much for storms out there. It's just suddenly we had 3 in a row hit within the same general area. So some years it's really busy. Other years, pretty much nothing happens. And I grew up getting used to that idea that every single year, weather just changes. And you can't say that it's supposed to be a certain way. Out here, out west, there are years, as you know, that are very wet and other years that are dry. Winters that are mild, winters that are very cold, winters that are very snowy, winters that are not. And it changes from year to year. You never know what you're going to get. Overall, we are not having more wildfires than ever before. This is a busy year. But remember, last year was not. And when you average it all out, we really have not been experiencing more wildfires. We just have the occasional busy year. This is one of those busy years. So we have to prepare for this. So the governor was talking to the audience about how much money we've spent on wildfires here in Wyoming. Now remember, the state has a biennium budget, 2-year budget. The money that was set aside for wildfires over that 2-year period, we've already spent. And it's not just sending in firefighting crews and all of the equipment and so on. Boy, when we send in those airplanes, and they come in from all over the country and out of state, and we send them in, Wow, that gets expensive. I mean, really expensive. But we got to do it, right? So we've already blown through that biennium budget, and we're starting to reach into our rainy day fund for money to fight Wyoming fires. Now, what's nice is the fire season should be coming to a close at some point, and we'll talk to Don Day at 7:45. We'll start getting that winter weather. Remember a few years ago there was a big fire up in the Snowy Range area. I had just gone camping with some friends up in the Snowy Range, and while up there I was looking at all of the beetle kill. And not just dead standing trees, but quite a bit laying down too. And I thought, at some point, this is going to catch on fire, and man, we're in trouble. And shortly after we got done camping, that's what happened. And that sucker burned out of control. There's nothing the fire crews could do about it. They tried. There was no way to get a handle on it. And then finally, about this time, a winter storm blew in, and wow, did it dump some snow on just the right spot, a lot of it. And that's what finally put it out. So that's pretty much what we're waiting on right now. When does that finally hit us? Because so far it's been sort of a mild October. Well, that's okay. Some Octobers, as you know, are really cold and snowy, and some years they're not. This is one of those years where it's not. So we're waiting on that to catch up. Meantime, as the governor is getting together with governors from other states, our governor with governors from other states, and wanting to have a conversation with the federal government, too, about putting money aside to make sure we have money for times like this, which is where I get into the budget issue. And to me, this is really the issue here. You know, when it comes to spending money, I am a tightwad with your money. You're the taxpayer. This is your money. And I'm a tightwad with that money. And it should only be spent where it absolutely is necessary to spend it. Which is why a lot of the funsy little things that government likes to spend money on, I say no. If I could get into the Wyoming state budget and start to tear it apart, there'd be a lot of people who would not be happy with me at things and how much I would take apart from the Wyoming budget. Where I would spend money, though, is put it aside, because I know, and we can't get complacent, this is the problem. We go through several years of nothing really happening. There's no big fires, there's no bad weather events. We get complacent, and we start wondering if we should dip into that money that we set aside for disasters. That's getting complacent. Then we have one of those busy years like we're having right now. This is a lot like FEMA after, of course, what's happened in the Appalachian Mountains, saying, oh, well, we're broke, we don't have any money. Well, why don't they have any money? Well, because they spent it on all sorts of other things. Instead of setting it aside and waiting, at some point we're going to have some kind of a disaster and FEMA's going to be called in and we're going to need that money. That's what they should have done. But instead they saw that money just sitting there and they spent it on all sorts of other things. So when the disaster finally happened, it wasn't there. That's complacency and irresponsible spending. And I'm calling on the same thing for the state of Wyoming. Put a huge stockpile of money aside because someday something bad's going to happen. We know it is. And we'll have more than enough money to do it. In the meantime, all of those funsy little projects that people like to spend money on, you want your high-speed internet? Let the private sector do it. You want a state shooting range for big-time competition? Sounds like a great idea. Let the private sector do it. You see what I'm doing here? All of these neat little projects need to go away, and we only spend money where we know at some point we're really going to need it. 7:16 is the time. Let's Wake Up Wyoming.
He's talking to himself in a padded room, and you could be the voice in his head. Join the conversation on Wake Up Wyoming, 866-97-WOODS.
All right, so Big Red, I have an answer for you. Big Red's over there in Hawk Springs. If you just joined me, I was talking about the way we spend money because Governor Mark Gordon was talking about running through. We've had some big fires this year, and we've run through our biennium budget for fighting fires, and we're dipping into basically our reserve, our rainy day fund for this. And he wants to get together with other states, governors, and maybe the federal government and make sure that we are ready for stuff like this. Because he thinks it's going to happen more than ever before. Well, my answer is it depends on what year you're talking about. So what Big Red just said to me is, according to some forecasters, that next year ought to be pretty dry too. Well, here's the deal with that. It's not that I totally disbelieve him, but I don't believe him either. You got to be ready. Remember, FEMA was supposed to have all sorts of money set aside for a disaster, and then when what happened in the Appalachian Mountains happened with Hurricane Helene, they weren't ready. They didn't have any money because they had blown it someplace else. You got to be ready for when things like this happen, and not complacent when we go through good times. So, remember, and this is the El Niño La Nina, I think. El Nino La Nina. There we go. El Nino La Nina. Well, I'm getting it wrong. You know what I mean. And that, in fact, this has to do with cycles of the sun. I don't know why I can't pronounce those two right now. But this has to do with cycles of the sun, not CO2. That has nothing to do with CO2. As we go through different sun cycles, sometimes the sun is very active, which is one of the reasons why we've been having these beautiful auroras. People even in Wyoming, way down here, have been going out at night to watch the beautiful light show in the sky because our sun's been very active. And when that happens, there's a region in the Pacific that heats up right along around the equator. And that affects our weather. That affects drought or heavy rain. And then we go into another cycle where there's not so much activity on the sun, and that affects us in a different way. So in one way, it makes for a very wet year. In another way, it makes for a very dry year. That's not the only thing, but that's one of the things that helps decide how much rain we're going to get or not get. So watch that big ball of fire at the center of our solar system. That's a big part of it. Again, not the only thing, but it's one of the big ones to watch. Now, we had gone through a period of just several years worth of drought. And out west, you know, our reservoirs were getting really low. And predictions were made that it would take decades to bring those reservoirs back up. Even if it started to rain again, which they didn't see that was going to happen. It would take decades to refill those reservoirs. Then, last winter, one winter. We had one winter. Was it the last winter or the winter before? It was the winter before. And remember, we got like a load of snow. Oh, my Lord, did we get a lot of snow. And whole reservoirs out west just filled right back up again. And we had more water than we know what to do with it. Then we went through a whole year of springtime into summer of just rain. Then that cycle changed again. And for us here out in the western states like Wyoming, the Dakotas, and so on, that has meant very little. We started off pretty good, but then we got into a period of very little rain. So what happens next? Well, longer-term forecasts are difficult. But what I'm pointing out, Big Red, is I understand when I look at those longer-term forecasts, could we have a dry winter and next year be very dry too? That could very well be. But the reason I don't believe any forecast right now, no matter what the forecast says, is because, remember, the so-called experts were predicting that our reservoirs out west were going to dry up. And there was just no hope of replenishing them. So what were we going to do? That's what the experts were saying. But that's not what happened, is it? Now, I do know the current forecast shows that once we get into this winter, they're saying, the experts, that this ought to be a pretty cold winter. And as far as how much precipitation, not a lot, not too little, somewhere in the middle. Okay, so that's what they say. Let's wait and see what happens. Because forecasting the weather is extremely difficult. As Don Day will tell you, it's difficult enough. And I've had this conversation with him on the air many times. It's difficult enough to forecast the weather 5 days out. So when someone tells you what's going to happen the next season, the next year, here's what's going to happen in the next decade, they don't know. They're using computer models and they're basing it on trends and so on, but we're not going to know exactly what's going to happen until we get there. So this is why I say we need to be prepared for whatever, because we're going to have some good times, some great weather. We're going to go through stretches where it will be, I feel like I'm Trump when I'm saying it's going to be unbelievable. But we're going to go through some unbelievable times when the weather's just exactly the way we want it. Then we'll go through stretches where we're wondering, what gods did we upset? What are we supposed to sacrifice to get out of this? Because it's just horrible out here. And it's just going to be that way for a while. And it has nothing to do with human activity. Okay? We're not causing this. If you go back through history, way back. Go way back. Read history books from way back, hundreds, even thousands of years ago. And they were going through the same thing. And so the trick is to be prepared for it, which is why I say during the good times, do not go spending money on all sorts of fungy, frilly little things through government. That's not government's job. That's when you prepare for times when, you get hit by several hurricanes within a 2-week period. Or it's a dry season and fires go out of control. Those times that really suck, that's when you put your resources aside. That way, when it does happen, we are more than ready to handle it. And we don't end up doing what FEMA just did. We don't have the resources. We're out of money. What about all that money we gave you? Well, we spent it on all this crap over here. Well, how about let's not do that next time? All right, coming up on some local news that we have to take care of. Then our weather forecast. Speaking of weather forecast, 7:45, Don Day is going to be on with me, and Don and I are going to talk about an extended forecast that we got to hang in there for a few more days, but sometime next week. It looks like a little bit of relief might be coming, and I'm going to grab Don by the throat and squeeze it out of him. Good news, whether he wants to give it to us or not, I swear to you. Coming up on 7:30. Wake Up Wyoming.
Where Wyoming comes to talk. This is Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods on K2 Radio. Be part of the show at 888-97-WOODS.
My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. Okay, this story here made me stop in my tracks and go, wow, hang on. Somebody's going to have to explain something to me. Again, Cowboy State Daily story. I did a good job on this one. Cheyenne School Board votes to close 8 schools. Parents want to revote. Hang on. Wait, what? After the story says Cheyenne School Board voted to stop using 8 of its elementary schools while rebuilding or expanding others, resulting in a potentially more students per classroom. Some parents want to revote. One board member described the decision as a massive overhaul of the district. Laramie County School District 1 board voted unanimously, but reluctantly, it says, on Monday to stop using 8 elementary schools for education. The move is to trigger the release of $83.4 million the Wyoming legislators set aside to rebuild an elementary school and to build another school. The state law requires the acceptance of most cost-effective remedy, a study, before the money for the schools and the rebuilding can be put to use. Quote, my heart is torn because I am a mom. I get it. I totally get it, said Trustee Brooke Humphreys at the meeting. But also, as a community member, I get it. And our community has been waiting and waiting and waiting for answers from the other side. Plenty of you said our hands are tied, and none of us have to make this decision. So the vice chair voiced frustration with what she characterized as a lack of timely help from the Wyoming legislators in the past year, with a former leader of our school district displacing one of our schools without board approval, forcing the whole situation at play. ARP Elementary School. So you people in Cheyenne who are familiar with this, help me out on this. It's in the South Park District, called the South Triad. Okay, it is now shut down, with students attending Eagle Ridge Elementary School in the meantime. Now, why they shut it down, I don't often know. I would have to get more information, because oftentimes when I take a look at a school, which a school district somewhere in the country might say, well, you know, this school is time to retire and build a new building. And I look at it and I think, your building's fine. What are you doing? You don't have to have a whole new building here. You're in a perfectly good building, but they think they need a good one. So I would need some help on that one to understand it. So under the state's SMERC, the board accepted Monday the school would be rebuilt by 2028. And it talks about who voted on this for the plan. The buildings may be repurposed, shuttered, or demolished. Cole Elementary slated for a rebuild with funding request for 2030 and completion by 2034. Hobbs Elementary would be scheduled to be rebuilt by 2030. Coyote Ridge would see an additional schedule for 2035. Many schools would see enrollment increase to compensate for the closures. So you would have to transfer students from this school to that school while this was going on. Meadowlark Elementary, for example, would swell from a current 485 to about 724. Story says the planned purpose for fewer centralized schools with higher populations rather than more neighborhood-style school districts. Parents, the story says, shocked, frustrated. Some told Cowboy State Daily that they even the South Triad, which stands to benefit from the plan, will see the closures of 4 schools with less neighborhood access, including for summer, including free lunch programs for summertime, for those people who might need it. Jessup in the Central Triad is known as a high-quality school. The story says some parents discussed how they'd move from their current neighborhoods so their children could attend it, or waiting in front of it all night to register their children there. But more than the neighborhood access, the possibility, the story says, property devaluation if any of these buildings are left abandoned. So people who live around the school say, okay, now you're abandoning, and that could devalue. Here's an empty building falling apart. If it's not demolished, you could devalue our neighborhood property values. So there's a lot to discuss here. The story says even big cities like Missouri don't have these big giant schools and lack community schools, said one parent. We're going to gut our community here. And then it continues. It's a good article, Cowboy State Daily again, and it talks about a lot about the districts and the neighborhoods in the area. Now, to me, this is the first I've heard about something like this, how they want to completely reorganize where the schools are and how they're run, demolish some schools, build some bigger ones. So for those people, parents in the area, think about this. Because in your area in Cheyenne, it's really going to change a lot about the layouts of your schools. And again, I often wonder, I'm not aware of all the problems they might be facing, so I need more of an education on this. But I still look at a lot of these old buildings as perfectly good buildings that could still be used. So to me, it's a little confusing. But again, I want to hear more before I make any kind of a call on it. 7:42, let's get Don Day on the line. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods on K2 Radio. Got something to say? Chat him on the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app or call 888-97-WOODS.
Time off. We go to Day Weather. Mark, yours standing by. Okay, Mark, help me out here because I got to take the good with the bad. The good news is the breeze picked up a little bit, and that blew a lot of the smoke out of the area, so literally we are all breathing easier because of that. The bad news is the breeze picked up a little bit, and it's fanning some of the fires. What do we do here?
Yeah, and that's going to be, unfortunately, we have to be persistent with our patience. And here for today and the next several days, a little bit of some wind, especially this Friday across the Pack Trail fire area that we'll be looking at some west to southwest winds. Primarily this afternoon, 15 to 25, some gusts of 30 to 40. So not good news there. Up in the Bighorns and the Elk Fire, a little bit of a better wind scenario, and winds will actually be shifting back to the south-southeast, blowing some of the fire on itself as we head into this afternoon, this evening. So, it's that ebb and flow. We don't have any good moisture here in the near term. We're going to continue to see more of what we have. And you have an easy button there on your desk, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Okay. So
Excellent.
Let's talk about being easy here because I do know when we get into later next week, bit of a cool down. That's nice. Now, there's a discussion among you meteorologists about whether that's going to bring wet or not. Does it?
Sure. Yes, it will. It just depends on exactly where. And so dial up that easy button all the way through the 16th of next week. So next Wednesday, just give it a good little smack. And then what we have is what you see is what you're basically going to have: above normal temperatures, below average precip, and very nice continuing fall weather. Then yes, as we get into next Thursday, the 17th, we're going to start to see our first substantial trough of Pacific low pressure actually move into the central and southern Great Basin and Rocky Mountain West region. It's going to slowly then move east through Wyoming and the Central Rockies and High Plains over the next 2 to 3 days. And by Friday and next weekend, Glenn, we could be looking at temperatures 40s to 50s for highs across lower elevations, lows 20s and some 30s. So our first real stint of cold fall weather. And even more importantly, western Wyoming, and also it looks like up towards the Bighorns and the Elk Fire, under the potential gun for some much, much needed snowfall. And a lot of questions still on the precip, just where it'll be falling and exactly when. But finally, we have some hope in sight, so keep those fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah, see, there's what I was talking about. I keep hearing folks like you meteorologists saying there's that potential, which gives us hope, and I'm glad about that. But then you're still hesitating at the same time. So here's what we're looking for in future forecasts. Just tell us it's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, hey, you have a great weekend.
You do the same.
Okay, 7:48 is the time. Bye, right?
Here I am.
Okay, here you are there, and he goes by. And you could have sworn that the guy driving the vehicle going way too fast is the Cookie Monster.
Really? Cookie Monster doesn't drive very fast.
Well, maybe he's
interested in cookies.
Maybe he was going to where the cookies were. Okay, so here's what from the newspaper The Sun: cops baffled as Cookie Monster caught on camera behind wheels speeding. So it was a traffic camera that caught him. So this guy, I think, knew that the traffic cameras were there, dressed up like the Cookie Monster, and went blowing on through, and just so that could be caught on camera.
You know, people have unusual attire lately. I was watching a baseball game, and all these people were dressed up. Remember those dancing grape nuts?
Yeah.
I don't know. Didn't make the connection of why they were like dancing grape nuts at the baseball game. Now we have Cookie Monsters who are driving
through.
And who knows who's walking the street nowadays?
Oh God, don't even want to go there. Well, now, and this is the story I just told you was out of Germany, and I thought if Cookie Monster wants to speed, you have the Autobahn.
Well, it's unlimited.
Yes, you do what you want on the Autobahn. You just go right ahead.
Yeah.
So go. But I think this guy wanted his picture taken by that police camera as he was going by. Now, this is a lot like, Frank, people will keep an eye on when is the Google car driving by.
Yeah.
And they get themselves all dressed up and go out in front of which I really love that humor.
I've seen the Google car.
Yeah.
You know, in multiple locations in multiple states, but they just kind of show up randomly. And I think that's their MO. And in some places, the neighborhood is so goofy that they're the crack of dawn when everyone's sleeping.
Yeah. But there are places where you can go to get an idea of where they're going to be.
Oh, really?
And you can track them. Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and set something up, I mean, you should set up like a football game in your front yard.
Yeah.
You know,
and exactly when they're going to come by.
Exactly, yeah.
You'll be able to see that picture for like 3 years.
How about a football game where everybody's dressed up like Cookie Monster? You see what I'm going for here, Frank?
I'm with you.
Go with sports.
All right, high school football statewide tonight, and in Casper, it is the 60th annual Oil Bowl as Kelly Walsh will host Natrona. Both teams are 3-3, and they're fighting for a playoff for a home playoff game, which is really important. Actually, that fourth seed. And for Kelly Walsh playing at home, they're 3-3, and they have not won the Oil Bowl since 2016. Natrona is coming off a win over Laramie last week, so they have a little bit of momentum. Kelly Walsh losing to Cheyenne East. It's always a great atmosphere for these Oil Bowls, and they've played this game in just about every conceivable weather condition, and the weather will be nice tonight. So that is a 6 p.m. start from the Harry Galdine Stadium. In Cheyenne is the Capital Bowl as Cheyenne East will host Cheyenne Central. East is 5-1 on the year, and Central is 1-5. Laramie will be in Cheyenne as well to take on South, and Laramie at 1-5 could certainly use a win to enhance their 4A playoff chances, and South is 0-6. Campbell County at 6-0 up in Gillette will take on Thunder Basin, comes in at 2-4. Sheridan at 6-0 will take on Rock Springs tonight, who comes in at 3-3, and that game will be played at the Trona County High School in Casper due to the smoke conditions up in Sheridan. In 2A, Bighorn on the road at Glenrock. Bighorn is 5-0, and Glenrock is 0-6. Burns at 3-3 will host Upton Sundance, who comes in at 2-2. In 1A, 9-man football, a big game is Pine Bluffs will host Saratoga. Both of those teams are 5-0. In 1A, 6-man, Matiti will be at KC this afternoon at 1, and Matiti comes in at 3-1. KC is 1-4. Midwest at 4-1 will be at 3-2 Riverside coming up tomorrow. Wyoming Cowboy football team with a home game tomorrow afternoon in Laramie to take on San Diego State. Cowboys are 1-4 overall, 1-0 in Mountain West Conference play after a victory over the Air Force 2 weeks ago. San Diego State is 2-3 overall and 1-0 in league play. Their last game was a win over Hawaii by 3 points. When you're coming off a bye week, you can either be one of two things: really, really fresh since you haven't played in a while, or really, really rusty since you haven't played in a while. We'll see how that turns out. Cowboys have a lot of injuries to overcome, but they got to just go out and play hard, force turnovers, have a balanced offense, and just play hard and play to win. This is a winnable game for Wyoming, easily. And the Cowboys are just 2-point underdogs playing at home. They should be able to take care of the Aztecs, you would think. And it's a 1:30 start tomorrow from War Memorial Stadium. We'll have that for you on K2 Radio in Casper and KOWB in Laramie. In the baseball playoffs, New York Yankees eliminated Kansas City 3-1 in 3 games to 1 with a 3-1 win. And Cleveland beat Detroit 5-4 in the other American League series, so that at 5-4, so that it's even at 2 games apiece. Game 5 will be on Saturday. Tonight is Game 5 of the National League series between San Diego and Los Angeles, and that's been a really, really interesting series, even at 2 games apiece.
So, baseball, you've had a week now. Have you changed your mind about it?
Well, no, they got to get through this round. Because the teams that I thought were going to win are actually they're on the verge of elimination. You know?
Aha! See, like I said, if you're a betting person going to Vegas, listen to what Frank says. Do the opposite.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Coming up on, it happens every time. Coming up on some local business we have to take care of. We're going to roll into news time. National local update on the weather forecast. You and I get back together, and I'll talk about the economy. That's the real economy, not what you're told is going on. Next hour and your phone calls. Wake Up Wyoming. .06 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. It's a Friday, which means you've made it. 888-97 was the phone number. That's 888-97-WOODS, which means you can talk about what I'm talking about, change the subject. That's all fine by me. I'm going to go on to something I've been wanting to get about. We'll go on about for a couple of days now. But if you want to change the subject, that's fine by me. You can go ahead and do that. And not just by calling the show at 888-97-WOODS, but all morning long, I get text messages from people, and I answer both on and off the air. So, if you haven't done it, you can download the Wake Up Wyoming app at your app store. It's free, and it gives you a lot of news, sports, weather, all sorts of other information for the state of Wyoming and the region, but also connects you with this show. So you can listen live, you can listen later as a podcast, and you can hit the chat option and send me text messages while I'm on the air. And again, none of that costs you anything. We just offer that for free. All right, so let's go real quick to the economy. Now, first off, on a side note, and I like the title of this article, reason number 9,276, why the legacy media deserves to die. And this is a story that I came across about a woman who has been a reporter for the Washington Post for quite a few years. And she has not been really all that honest with the news that she gives her editors. And sometimes she even just makes stuff up. But she's trying to do her job, and she's doing what she can, and she noticed that a lot of times she just lies to her bosses. And they just believe her, and it becomes news in the Washington Post. And she finally just goes ahead and admits she's been doing this, and talks about how she has completely lost faith in news media because of her experience at Washington Post and at other places. Now, here's just one of the stories here. Just in, more good news, inflation. U.S. inflation was just 2.4% in September. That's close to the Federal Reserve's 2% target, the lowest since 2021. And that story is completely bogus. And here's some people that are posting, I got to get used to saying X on Twitter, you know. And they're in the grocery store showing things like the cost of eggs, which have increased greatly, as you know. And they go on to inflation hit a 2.5% high in September, topping expectations. Jobless claims, highest since 2023. So on the one hand, what is the deal? You keep getting news on the one hand that people are really doing great, that we're making more money than ever before, unemployment is low, and inflation has gotten under control, and yet here's this woman saying, look, I was turning in numbers like this to the Washington Post, and they were just publishing it like it was true. It's not honest. It's not the real numbers. John Favreau, he put this up here, what real numbers are. Let's see. And he talks about how high prices have gone up, and he shows groceries, because they tell you, you know, groceries have increased by 3.3%. Actually, they're up 21.1%. Eggs, they're down by 3.6%. Actually, they're up 49.3%. On and on he goes with all of these numbers. And that's what really got me started on this kick. What exactly is happening with these economic numbers? Now, I've told you in many cases, just don't believe numbers that are given out to you by government and media. And I know you wonder, where do you go to get actual numbers? It's difficult. Well, there's several reasons why. One, as you know, people are going to lie to you for political reasons. People in government will, and the media will. But even those people who are trying to be honest about it get it wrong. A lot of times they're just inept at their jobs. To give you an example before I dig into a little bit more of this, because what you were thinking about inflation is not untrue. And I'll show you that in just a second. But during the Obama years, they kept saying unemployment's at an all-time low until you include the workforce participation rate, the U6 index, and you find out that unemployment's at an all-time high. And the same thing goes on now with unemployment, but also the same thing happens with inflation. Okay, so, headline. Why the stats say the economy is good and real people say no, it's not. Story says the study corrects bad inflation data and merges that with output to show that we've been in recession, says this economist, for about 2.5 years. And it further reveals what happened after a devastating COVID response. Now, and some of this has to do also with adjusted numbers. I know this gets kind of into the weed. It's early in the morning for this, but hang with me for just a minute. Adjusted numbers. They come out with numbers in January. January's economic numbers are. And by the time we get to the end of spring, they say, and we've adjusted those numbers, which means the original numbers you gave to me were bogus. Now you have to adjust them, and they don't usually get adjusted in a good way. Story here says the difficulty in measuring the size of the nation's economy is twofold. First, there is insufficient data to directly measure the number and size of all transactions in an economy or to monitor all economic activity. Second, so a lot of this is estimating. Second, the measuring tools used, in this case the Federal Reserve note, changes value over time. Thus, fluctuations in the nominal value of your money can be due to real changes in economic activity. Okay, then government metrics of inflation suffer from various problems which tend to underestimate the rise in prices over time. The shortcomings have been more pronounced over the last 4 years during a relatively rapid, basically our currency is being devalued. And I can name several reasons why, including printing too much of it and borrowing too much money. The study does not attempt to address the difficulties concerning measuring monetary value and economic activity. It just points out that there's a problem there. Also, bias-related one of the most cited inflationary gauges is Consumer Price Index, measures the change in prices for a fixed basket of goods over time. While the index contains a proxy for the cost of home ownership, it does not actually account for this directly. Instead, it's proxy data, not real-time data. Also, bias related to regulations. There's certain government regulations which can affect adjustment. This is where, again, it really gets into it talks about bias in indirect purchasing. In other words, there's a lot of bias out there. And I know if I read too much into this, it gets really into the weeds. But basically what it's saying is, according to adjustments in inflation since 2019, it's been underestimated by about half. This has resulted in growth being overstated by about 15%. It's a large amount for just a few years. So, in other words, to wrap it up for you, is over the years you've been told, especially during the Biden years here, you've been told, hey, wow, inflation, we've really got that under control. It is true we are not inflating. Prices are not going up as fast as they were a few years ago, but they're still going up. So if you go to the grocery store and you think, what do you mean you got inflation under control? You're right about that. When you take a look at the cost of housing and other goods that you want to buy, and you're thinking, wow, they're telling me things are really great, but when I go to the store, whatever store it is, hardware store, whatever, clothing, it's not that great. You're right, it's not that great. And the articles that I have here, which again I don't like to get into it on the radio because it really gets into the weeds. But it shows that, there's a lot of bias out there. Now, some of the bias is not a bias as in someone trying to lie to you, and some of it is. Depends on what we're talking about here. But it has a lot to do with even the way your government collects data, and then the way your news media wants to report that data. So when you listen to let's say, if you like to tune in to any of the television networks, and you hear some anchor saying, but inflation is under control and unemployment is low, they don't have good economic data. And if they did have it, do they really want to report it right now as we get this close to an election? No, your gut has been right about this. It's not been all that good out there. Sorry to say. 8:16 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
Sure, this show is sustainable. We sequester all gas emissions to one room. Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods, live on AM 1030 and FM 95.1, weekdays at 6.
Joining me, 888-97 Woods, the phone number, 888-97-WOODS. This is not going to make you happy. Which you might wonder, why would I tell you something that's not going to make you happy? Because it's talk radio. It's what we do. Texas Secretary of State to election officials in Texas. You need to accept non-citizens' driver's licenses as valid ID to vote. What? Okay. Let me see. Breaking, the story says Texas Secretary of State directs poll workers to accept non-citizen driver's license as ID to vote. And then there's a video where you see them telling him to do that. So the story says, obviously you can't trust a single video describing, but the whole point voter ID is to prevent ineligible voters from casting ballots. And it really kind of surprised me this is happening in Texas. You would think they would be one of the most secure states. Texas is a little strange in that sense. On the one hand, they're very conservative states, but on the other hand, not only have a lot of liberals moved into there, but a lot of people coming up from south of the border have moved into there. So it changes the political dynamic. It's true, the story says the Secretary of State requires officials to inform people that non-citizens are not allowed to vote and that there are potential penalties, but making something illegal is hardly an effective prevention tool. That's an important line. Just because you made it illegal doesn't prevent it. Think about that on so many different levels. We're going to make drugs illegal. People do drugs anytime they want. Illegal, hard drugs too. So, okay, we're going to make guns illegal. Some people want to do that. Great. You think that's going to stop guns? We're going to make murder illegal. Does that stop murder? No, obviously not. So, okay. It's hardly an effective prevention tool. We have prisons full of people who committed crimes despite knowing the risk. And the risk from illegal voting has historically been small, non-existent, yet still. This author says, I can't say why the Secretary of State has chosen to implement this policy. However, it is easy to speculate. It is just conceivable that somebody was issued a restricted driver's license and subsequently became a citizen and failed to update their identification, if you want to go there. But really. Okay, so get a load of this. California Governor Gavin Newsom just signed a bill barring local governments in the state from establishing local laws requiring residents to present ID to vote. So Governor DeSantis, it's not surprising it's California. Governor DeSantis of California is, look, when someone shows up, they don't have to show ID to vote, okay? Oh, okay, so anybody can vote anywhere as many times as they want, you know. And this is one of the bigger states. All right. In case that anybody wanted to quell concerns about ballot integrity and valid ID and paper ballots and so on. Oh, that reminds me. Let me go back to here in the state of Wyoming for a story like that. So there is a group, and some of these people I know, who have been going around trying to get Wyoming to hand count ballots. And I know some of you out there agree that hand counting ballots is a safer, more effective way to ensure integrity when it comes to our ballots in the state of Wyoming. But I've always looked at that and thought, well, not necessarily, because before we ever had electronic voting machines, people were stuffing ballot boxes. But get a load of this story here. Again, it's another Cowboy State Daily one, but I think it's a good story. Gillette hand-counted ballot test shows it would take hundreds of counters in Gillette and cost up to about $1.3 million. A movement for hand-counting election ballots in Wyoming has been gaining steam, but faces some logistical hurdles. Now, by the way, they have done some demonstrations in various towns around Wyoming to show here's how easy it is to hand count. However, and that might really work well in some of our smallest communities, because, I mean, let's face it, we have communities, there's 100 people in this community, 50 people in that community. Oh, for Pete's sakes, hand count them. But what about when you get to the bigger ones? Story says a hand count election test conducted in Gillette last week showed that it could take hundreds of volunteers and cost $1.3 million to make a full counting of ballots work in Campbell County alone, with an expectancy of getting results within the day of the election. Gillette resident, hang on, just jumped to me. There we go. Gillette resident said and he's a hand counting supporter who helped facilitate the Campbell County test, said although she thought the test was very successful and proved that hand counting can be done in Wyoming, it also showed a lot of volunteers were needed to make it happen. And I wonder about the money, $1.3 million. Why? I don't know. I'd like to see why. We would need a substantial amount of people to count the ballots. The test also indicated that the requirements for reporting the results in the state of Wyoming election would have to be adjusted. As current law says, election results must be turned in by 10:30 p.m. election night. Now, one thing it is fun about watching election results in Wyoming, because we're such a small state population-wise, the polls close, 6 o'clock, I think, folks? I forget what time we close the polls. And by 10:30, we know the results. It doesn't take long for those results to come in. And oftentimes, you can go every election cycle to websites and watch the results come in real time. Now, I'm not one to do that. I always go to bed. I mean, I go to bed at my regular time. I'll find out the results when I wake up the next morning. But I know there are people who love to get online, like they're watching some sporting event, and they watch the numbers come in real time, and they debate and haggle. It's just, to them, it's a big thrill to watch all of this and follow. I don't care. I'll just wake up the next morning, roll over, and take a look at the results to see what happened. Campbell County Clerk Cindy Lovelace, who hosted the test and performed a statistical analysis of the results, said the demonstration proves that serious challenges existed running with hand counting. I just think it's a massive undertaking, she said. Now, I go back to, for the bigger communities. She also said people were interrupted too often to calculate their numbers under the current practice. People came from as far away as Rock Springs to participate in the test held at the Campbell County Courthouse on Friday. 30 ballots from each of the county's 37 precincts and a total of 1,100 ballots were filled out for the test. The first test counted the ballots on 240 ballots, counting 23 races each time in 6.75 hours at a rate of 204.4 races per team. It was, let me see, yeah, it took them a little while longer than they thought it was going to take them. The second test, 249 ballots within 12 races, each in 4 hours at the rate of 747 races per hour. And again, takes them a little bit longer than they thought it was going to take them to do it, and then you got to get all the volunteers for things like this. And then, of course, the questions will come in, do you trust the volunteers? So, on the one hand, I'm fascinated by the push in Wyoming to have a hand counting, but on the other hand, I look at it and think, and they have some problems too. It's not as cut and dry as you might think. Now, once again, when we get into very small communities in Wyoming, piece of cake, easy. But what about the bigger ones? Logistically, it gets to be a lot tougher. Coming up on 8:30, local news coming away after local news. Nice long segment of open phones, so jump on in. 888-97 Woods, the phone number. That's 888-97 WOODS. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
And we're back. Sorry, we were busy tricking pescatarians into eating Rocky Mountain oysters. Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods.
8:36 the time. Wake Up Wyoming. Nice long segment of open phones here. 888-97 Woods, the phone number. 888-97 WOODS or Big Rating Guernsey. Last person to send me a text on the Wake Up Wyoming app, which you can do too. Just hit the chat option and send me notes. Okay, so the legislator, this is going to be a big topic for a while now. So we're talking about getting nuclear power here in the state of Wyoming. Now, we're still a few years off from that, but the project's underway. They broke ground, but they're a long way from actually building the nuclear facility. We're breaking ground in other buildings before we get into the nuclear part of it. But the idea over in Kemmerer, Wyoming, putting up a nuclear power plant, which don't think of it as your traditional nuclear power plant. It's another kind of a plant. Also, you got to take a bit of a different look at how we store nuclear waste. Because back in the 70s, your 3 Mile Island days, nuclear waste was an entirely different animal. And so when nuclear waste reached about its half-life, it was still really volatile stuff. And we had the damnedest time trying to figure out what to do with it, which is why even back then I was opposed to going with nuclear, because I looked at it and thought, well, what do you do with the waste? I mean, it's great when it is up and running, but what do you do with the waste? And then let's not forget, the country tried, our federal government tried making nuclear waste disposal facilities. Remember Yucca Mountain? And what a disaster Yucca Mountain turned to be. Massive boondoggle. So what do we do with that waste? Which has been a lot of the complaints that people have had about nuclear over the years, is what to do with that. And then, yeah, there are problems. There have been, your 3 Mile Island was human-caused. They eventually did get part of 3 Mile Island up and running. The containment building did everything it was supposed to do. Well, most everything. There was still problems. There was still some leaking going on. Your media and government were not exactly honest with you about that, but mostly it did everything it was supposed to, mostly. And so that facility is secure now. Then, of course, Chernobyl with Russia never built containment buildings, and they kept saying how superior their nuclear facilities were. But again, we're talking way back when, right? And for those who are asking, what about Fukushima? Don't build a nuclear plant in an area that is, there's earthquakes, there's tsunamis. One causes the other. Now, some people say, well, what about Yellowstone? Yellowstone actually is not in danger of erupting anytime soon. But if you're still worried about earthquakes and things like that, okay, I get you. So we still have a lot to discuss here. But yet, has nuclear become more viable? Yes, it has, especially with what to do with the waste, because now they can take that half-life and they go ahead and work it down so they can reuse what's still viable in that material and then work it down so they can reuse that. And by the time they're done, what's left that can be used and needs to be disposed of is far better off than what we used to do. So you can't think in old terms anymore. A lot has been figured out with nuclear waste since things like 3 Mile Island. We've come a long way, baby, in other words. Still, though, our Wyoming state legislators are trying to consider, what are we going to do to store high-level waste? And it may not just be our own if we have a nuclear site here. So again, Cowboy State Daily article, state law now allows used nuclear fuel to be kept by at advanced nuclear facilities in Wyoming where it is produced. As long as those facilities meet federal requirements, there are no operating nuclear reactors in Wyoming right now, but Tierra Power broke ground on that one in Kemmerer. Committee co-chair in Rawlins spoke in favor of the bill, arguing it will bring Wyoming in alignment with federal regulations. He also supported bringing nuclear waste to Wyoming in the past, mentioning the economic benefit. In other words, making Wyoming a dump place for nuclear. I was distracted by a note. Mommy M just sent me a note in Casper. Was that psychic ad real? I did not hear the psychic ad. But I would like to know what you heard if you're asking if it's real. Anyway, back to the story. There's some psychic ad that she heard. What's the psychic ad? I want to know what that is. I didn't get to hear that. Okay, so a few people spoke of opposition to the bill, mentioning environmental risk of transporting and storing nuclear waste here in Wyoming. Now, I can understand why some people would look at Wyoming and say, well, there's a great place to store waste. We have such open spaces here and some mountains that we can go deep under mountains, things like that. So I understand why that's attractive. There's not many people out here. Yet still, there's opposition from within the state. Nobody wants to be the place where nuclear waste is dumped. There are new developments in the reuse and spent nuclear fuel, and I was just talking about that a moment ago. Several bills are now making their way through Congress. The legislation falls short of approving here in Wyoming temporary storage in Wyoming, but provides more clarity of how Wyoming could consider storing nuclear waste if it wants to, which would technically only be allowed to be temporary. So anyone who would store it in Wyoming, it's not supposed to stay here. It would be a temporary thing is the proposal. Wyoming law now conflicts with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulations on nuclear storage, but their proposed bill would bring the state in line with the NRC rules and could save the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality time with duplicate work. It also clarifies procedure for legal storage of waste. So the arguments, the story says, one Lander resident, Stephanie Kessler, was one of the people against the proposed bill. Quote, with all due respect to the federal government, they can get it wrong, especially when it comes to nuclear waste. Senator Ed Cooper, Republican Thermopolis, mentioned the NRC spends a significant amount of time considering the environmental impacts of every nuclear plant it approves. He believes opposing all nuclear storage in Wyoming is closed-minded. So you got two different sides of the story. Texas legislator passed a law in 2021 prohibiting the construction of a nuclear waste storage facility and the issuance of permits for the facility. So Texas and the U.S. Supreme Court recently announced it will hear a case fighting the issuance of this permit, saying that they can't store it there. So, okay, temporary. What about that? The Yucca Mountain nuclear waste repository site in Nevada, says Cowboy State Daily, is the only location tentatively approved for permanent storage of nuclear waste. And like I said, that turned out to be a massive boondoggle a long time ago. And even then, that's supposed to be a temporary storage space. So we have a lot to consider here. This is a story. I haven't heard about this in a while. I started thinking about it again when they wanted to open up the Kemmerer nuclear power plant. Right away, the question goes, well, what do you do with the waste? Now, again, nuclear waste is not what it used to be. We've come a long way, baby. Yet still, would you want a storage facility, even a temporary one, in the state of Wyoming? And where, if you did? And some people look at it not just for safety reasons, but economic reasons, because some people look at it and think, you can make a lot of money storing something that other people don't want. Even storing it temporarily. Boy, we can make a lot of money temporarily storing things that other people don't want, and we possibly could. My worry, and part of it also, there's a lot of worries, but a part of it also is, you sure that temporary storage is temporary? Because I can see us getting stuck with it, too. We have a long way to go on this and a lot to discuss. 8:45 is the time. I still want to know what Mommy M heard when she heard that psychic ad. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
It's Wake Up Wyoming with Glenn Woods on AM 1030 K2 Radio. Join the show at 888-97-WOODS.
Well, that's pleasant music there. 8:48 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. Off we go to talk to Frank Gambino. Frank, I know you love driving around the state of Wyoming.
I did last night. I didn't even. Yes. I didn't even get home last night till 11:40.
Wow. Okay. See, when I first got to Wyoming, and I still can't believe that was like 16 years ago, and I was talking to someone, I had to go all the way to Jackson Hole because I was going to receive one of those Wyoming Association of Broadcaster Award thingies for a morning show, right? Mm. And I had not driven across the state yet, so I asked somebody, can you give me the scenic route? Now, I'm leaving Gillette at the time, right? And he drove me right through Thermopolis and down Wind River Canyon.
Oh, man, that's a good start.
Wow. Yeah, that's an amazing drive there. They've reached their centennial for the Wind River Canyon Road.
Have they? Really? I stop and take a picture, but I probably I stop in the same place. There's a little turnout just before, it'll be on the Thermopolis side. And there's like, well, this is perfect. But I'm like, I'm taking the same picture every single time. I got to stop.
Yes, every single time.
I want to know.
Well, I have complained to you about that every time you go on vacation and go to a sporting event.
Yeah.
It's the same picture you send us. So you could send us old pictures and we wouldn't know. Well, and save yourself some time.
Okay,
but anyway.
It's a timestamp, yeah. Who climbs up on
It is, okay. But
who climbs up outside the tunnels of the Wind River Canyon and actually like spray paints it or something? How did they
spray paints up there
or whatever, like graffiti or something? How did they get up and do that?
See, I don't know. I've wondered that myself a few times. We used to take 11 hours to drive to Thermopolis. Now you can do it in like a half hour.
Yeah.
That's what that canyon road did. At the time they built it, it was the most expensive road project in the United States.
They had to carve that thing out of there, didn't they?
I had no idea that it was that. Oh, my Lord, yeah. I mean, because you can imagine the canyon. I mean, even just picture the railroad going through there, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the canyon just had solid walls going up on either side. They had to carve that out of the rock.
And build the tunnels to go with that, too.
They recently, October. Yes. Oh, my Lord. So, the canyon... It was a route that was used even by the Indians way back when. I mean, it's been there for such a long time. But in order to build the road that went through that thing, dear Lord.
Crazy.
October 1st, they had a big ceremony. Yeah, they've had a big ceremony for that road on October 1st to celebrate it. And then they're trying to find an alternative route in case of landslide were to close it. And so that's a whole nother road project right there. Anyway, 8:51. Go.
All righty. High school football to the max statewide. In Casper, it's the 60th annual Oil Bowl. Kelly Walsh will host Natrona. Both teams are 3-3. Natrona coming off a win last week over Laramie, and Kelly Walsh losing to Cheyenne East. Now, Kelly Walsh has not won the Oil Bowl since 2016, but this looks to be a pretty even matchup between these Casper schools. That's a 6 o'clock start from the Harry Galdine Stadium. Also tonight in Cheyenne, it's the Capital Bowl as Cheyenne East will host Cheyenne Central. East has won 5 of 6, and Central has lost 5 of 6. Laramie will be in Cheyenne to take on South, and Laramie at 1-5 certainly could use another win to enhance their 4A playoff chances, and South is 0-6. 6-0 Campbell County in Gillette to take on Thunder Basin, who comes in at 2-4. Sheridan at 6-0 will take on Rock Springs, and that game will be played at Natrona County High School in Casper tonight at 6 due to the smoky conditions up in Sheridan. In 2A, Bighorn on the road at Glenrock. Bighorn is 5-0. Glenrock is 0-6. Burns will host Upton Sundance. Burns comes in at 3-3, and Upton Sundance 2-2. In 9-man football tonight, a really big game is Pine Bluffs and Saratoga will hook up in Pine. It's both teams are 5-0. In 6-man football, Matitsi plays KC in KC this afternoon. Matitsi's 3-1. KC is 1-4. And then tomorrow, Midwest will be at Riverside. Midwest is 4-1, and Riverside is 3-2. The Wyoming Cowboy football team back in action tomorrow in Laramie to take on San Diego State. Pokes did win their last game, which was 2 weeks ago over the Air Force, so they're 1-0 in Mountain West Conference play, 1-4 overall. The Aztecs beat Hawaii last week by 3, so they're 1-0 in league play and 2-3 overall. Now the Cowboys are coming off their bye week, so sometimes you just never know. I mean, they could come out fresh because they haven't played in a while, or they could come out rusty because they haven't played in a while. But they have some injuries they have to overcome, but they got to be able to play hard, and this is a winnable game for Wyoming, absolutely positively. There are 2-point underdogs in the game, and they can do this. This is a 1:30 kickoff tomorrow from War Memorial Stadium. We'll have that for you on K2 Radio in Casper and KOWB in Laramie. In the National Football League, the Denver Broncos at home on Sunday to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers are 2-2, and they've lost 2 in a row, and the Broncos are 3-2, and they've won 2 in a row. How about that?
So, Frank, every time you talk about UW this weekend, it sounds to me like you're trying to convince them. You've got this. You have no excuse. You can win this. This is doable. That's what I hear. Somebody
needs to encourage them. Because there's games coming up later in the schedule, like Wyoming doesn't have much of a chance in this one at all.
Yeah.
So
not a chance. So you just want to make sure by the end of the season they don't look too bad.
Right. Yeah. Respectable is a good word. Look respectable.
Respectable is a good word. Huh?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Frank. Coming up on some local business we have to take care. We're going to roll into news time after that. National local update on the weather forecast. It's Wake Up Wyoming. .06 the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. Got some pretty cool messages from some people here. Friday, by the way. Glad you made it. Arnie, who's in Casper, just texted me this. Whenever I have to fill out a form that asks who to call in an emergency, I always put ambulance. Because no one in my family is going to answer a call from an unknown number. You see, something we need to fix. If you ever did get a number, when I see unknown number, I don't even look at it. They can leave a message. If it's something important, I'll go ahead and answer the message. But I hear people all the time complain about spam calls. I don't really worry about spam calls because if I don't know your number, I'm not picking it up. So what happens if something happened to a family member of mine and these are authorities calling? Well, leave a message. I'll get back to you. Now, Mommy M sent me a note saying she wanted to know what was that commercial we played for a psychic. And I didn't hear that one. I don't know. She writes back, I don't think I can find the right ad. But it sounds like something you would hear during a late-night TV show. Wow. So we had some kind of a psychic ad thing on there. I used to love those late-night, if I couldn't sleep, or me, I get up really early in the morning. I used to love getting up really early in the morning and watching all-night infomercials if I couldn't sleep. To me, it was hysterical. Micah is on the phone. Morning, Micah.
Good morning, and welcome back to Cheyenne.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's actually, it's cloudy here this morning, but it's nice. I like it out there. We got some good fall colors going.
We do. It's really been pleasant this week.
Yeah.
Driving back from the East Coast lately, coming through Nebraska,
mm-hmm.
There is a whole stretch of line markers.
Right.
Usually they're just either white, solid, or yellow. But in this case, it's just for the lanes. And, it's usually just the white, chopped up things.
Right.
Unless you can't pass. Okay, well, in this one stretch of Nebraska, they've got, not is it just white, but it's white on one side and black on the other. Mm-hmm. So driving back through, at one point, we had made a stop, and I was totally refreshed. I was okay. I already know that Nebraska takes forever to drive through.
Right.
But, we started driving again, and I was so fatigued. And finally it dawned on me, for as intrigued as I was at first with those black and white lane separator lines, it's almost like a double hypnosis. It's bad enough that you're driving along and you got that rhythm, of the little white ones. But when you've got two of them, it's like your mind goes into double duty.
Yeah.
And it is exhausting.
It actually has. Okay.
Never have that here.
Let me give you a little clue on that, because I found this out many years ago. I used to drive some long distances when I was much younger, and I found the best time to drive those long distances, so I didn't fall asleep at the wheel, was overnight.
Right.
Because if I can only see as far as my headlights, there's not that hypnotic effect. But during the day, and especially in states like Nebraska, that kind of a fatigue is actually, you can go check out, there's research on that. That's actually a thing, which is why one of the advantages to driving not all of, but many of Wyoming's highways is we do have lots of turns, which helps with that kind of a line fatigue. Yes, that actually is a hypnotic thing.
Well, I would be interested if some truckers would call in and give some hints on how people deal with that, because, it's bad enough even when you're younger, but when you get to be my age, it is so easy to get caught up in that stupid stuff. And I thought, wow, it gets harder and harder as it is, and then to have that thrown on it. But I thought, that's a perfect example of let some other place test out what's coming down the road, and then before we adopt it.
Right.
Because initially I saw it and I thought, wow, this is really nice. It's a little diversion. It was kind of nice for the first half hour. Yeah. And then it was like, oh, my God, this is killing me.
I tell you, when I would like to see some of this in places like Wyoming. Nebraska could do it, too. It would help entertain people. I forget where it is. There's a stretch of roadway in America. Now, when you get up to a stop sign, and they put those little ridges in the road, there's a stop sign. There's one place in America where they tell you to slow down to a certain speed because they've put those ridges, if you're driving at the right speed, it's music. Your tires are making music.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, can you imagine? They pick some different symphonies, tunes that everybody knows. Slow your car down, drive across those ridges. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, let's toss a couple of those in. So in the middle of nowhere on some Nebraska interstate, you hit a bunch of those ridges, just got to be going the speed limit. There's entertainment for you. How's that?
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That is nice. Okay, well, anyway, I thought I would just pass that along because, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's affected by that. We're close enough to Nebraska. A lot of us go into Nebraska quite often.
You're definitely not. And like I said, you can go ahead and look that up, on the interweb thingy, and you'll find some research that says, there is a road fatigue because of long stretches of highway and dotted lines. That is actually a thing.
Yeah, and then when those lines have two colors to them, really, your brain just goes bonk after a while.
Right. Did you also have something? Did you have something on the psychic ad?
I have not heard that, but I listen to Coast to Coast, throughout the night. I just have it play in the background, so when I kind of ease out of sleep for a while, I listen to it and stuff.
Oh,
and
that show will definitely.
If she heard something on that.
Okay, because
that show. I have not heard anything.
Coast to Coast after Art Bell can definitely put you to sleep in the middle of the night. I guarantee it.
But Art Bell's not there anymore.
No, he's not there. That's
George.
Yeah, that's why you fall asleep to that show. Okay. All right. Thank you, Micah. I appreciate it. No, back when Art Bell did Coast to Coast, he was a great storyteller. He was an amazing storyteller. And so if you don't know, I call it the Overnight Spook Show. It's been around for a very long time. Great idea for an overnight talk radio show where they talk about ghosts and aliens and UFOs and all those. And Art Bell was just the best storyteller. So Art Bell finally retires then dies. And so they have George Norrie, George Norrie is a longtime broadcaster, television and radio, has been around for a very long time. But I'm sorry, George, I show up to work at a little before 2 o'clock in the morning, and the show's on. And I just turn it off and go on to something, do my work. I can't listen to it because it's just not what Art Bell used to do. My opinion on the Overnight Spook Show, which it could be a great show again. You just got to get someone who knows how to tell a story, right? Troy Malone is in Cheyenne. Morning, Troy. He says, I was talking last hour about nuclear waste because there is some discussion not just about storing nuclear waste in Kemmerer, Wyoming, because of a power plant that might be built here, but also does Wyoming want to temporarily store nuclear waste for other states? And some argue that we could make a lot of money at that. I worry for several reasons. Now, remember, nuclear waste today is not what it used to be. They found a way to continue to recycle and use it, so the potency of nuclear waste today is nowhere near what it used to be. However, still, it's still potent. And I worry about temporary. We would be a temporary storage facility. Okay, you're going to get that out of here when? You see where my worry is, right? Okay, so Troy says, temporary storage of nuke waste, do they have any idea how much actual nuke weapons are stored here? Good point. Chet Yoder says, put nuclear waste in New Mexico, they can handle it. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, again, some look at Wyoming as a storage facility just because it is a big state with a very low population, and of course you know that already. So it would be very easy to store it way out here, especially because we got the mountains for it, etc. That's what's being discussed right now. And that's, as we get closer to maybe doing it, that you can imagine that's going to be a heated discussion. All right, coming up on 9:16. 888-97-WOODS is the phone number. That's 888-97-WOOD. Oh, wait. Miss Mary looked it up. U.S. Route 66 in New Mexico. This musical road plays America the Beautiful when a vehicle drives at 45 miles an hour. The road is located between 4 and 5 miles eastbound. Musical road in Lancaster, California. The first road in the United States to play a tune when cars drive over it. The road plays the finale of the William Tell Overture. So you just they give you a sign and say, just go this speed limit. And again, it's those ridges, like when you pull up to a stop sign to warn you that there's a stop sign. You know that, right? So imagine just making a musical tune out of that, and that's what your tires do. We need one of those in Wyoming. Just putting that out there to YDOT if you're listening. 9:16. Wake Up Wyoming.
So many opinions, we had to build the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app to hold them all. Free download from AM 1030 K2 Radio.
9:22 is the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. Okay, so real quick, let's do this. So we were talking with Micah about a road that there's a couple roads out there where those little ridges, normally the ones that they put in front of stop signs, that let you know there's a stop sign there. A couple of roads in America that tell you to drive a certain speed because it plays music. Your tires will play music. And I said, we need that in the state of Wyoming. And Miss Mary went ahead and did the research for us here. And it's Route 66 in New Mexico plays America the Beautiful at 45 miles an hour. And Musical Road in Lancaster, California plays the finale of the William Tell Overture. So what, Miss Mary asked, what would we have for a Wyoming road? Because I think we need one of those in Wyoming. Now, right away, I went for the themes for the Addams Family. And we can even do the finger click, click, snap on that one. That would work great. Miss Mary just won the Brilliant Moment Award for this Friday. She said, I want Ned Ledoux's Cadillac Cowboy either heading to KC or Cheyenne. I think it needs to head to KC where he lived. But yeah, Ned Ledoux's Cadillac Cowboy on the way to KC, Wyoming. Let's see, here's Rick. He's in Cheyenne. Hang on while I call up that message. He's texting me on the Wake Up Wyoming app. Wyoming could play 2001 Space Odyssey between Cheyenne and Casper. Oh, wait. Okay, so heading to Devil's Tower. Yeah. We not 2001 Space Odyssey, but what was the music for Close Encounters of the Third Kind? So as you're heading up the road toward Devil's Tower, the music, your tires are playing the music for Close Encounters. See, now we're thinking here. All right, if you got more, send them in, because I think those two are really good. We could have two roads, and those would obviously make a lot of sense. All right. Now, Tumbleweed, he's over in KC. Speaking of Tumbleweed, this means that when people drive into KC, they're going to hear a Ned Ledoux song on their tires, if you're okay with that. I think you should be. All right, so Tumbleweed says, since we were talking about storing nuclear waste in Wyoming, I used to live right by Yucca Mountain in, Betty, Nevada? And tortured the site. I thought it was fine. It was shut down because Harry Reid didn't want it in his backyard. Yeah, and it turned out to be, what was the expense of that tumbleweed? It was a huge boondoggle. They cost a ton of money. And they never got anything done with it. Paul says the kind of temporary unfunded liability the federal government has yet to fund. Jones and Casper says no nuke junk, not Yucca Mountain. Mommy M did send me a video of the one of the musical roads, which you can look up online. Chet and Yoder says, thank God my vehicles know the way home like a good horse. So, all right, you can send me messages. 888-97-WOODS is the phone number, 888-97-WOODS. Or do what these people do and text me. I do like the idea, Mary. Oh, Mary, I really like the idea, not just of the one for KC, but also you're heading toward Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower is within sight. You're driving to Devil's Tower, and there's the theme song for Close Encounters played by your tires. I'm going to have to mention this. The owner of the property is a friend of mine around Devil's Tower, is State Senator Ogden Driscoll. I'm going to send him a note. Because he was actually president of the Senate past couple of years. If anyone has the pull to get that done, it would be him, I wonder. All right. So, we're just solving problems here. I wanted to get, I'm going to bring up something that I did earlier this morning for those people who missed it because you weren't here in the 6 o'clock hour and because you were sleeping and stuff. So we had a fire that it got really close to Chugwater, Wyoming. And you know that one of my favorite towns in Wyoming is Chugwater. So I had posted, because friends of mine in Chugwater were sending me pictures and video, I posted a story about the fire. And everybody was asking, how did it start? So I was there yesterday because every time I head to Cheyenne, I have to pull into Chugwater. A friend of mine owns the soda fountain, so I get a burger there. Really good cheeseburger, bacon cheeseburger, but you got to ask for the house one because it's got a special seasoning in it. Really good. And then, so I get the bacon cheeseburger. I asked there. But then when I went across the street to my friends over there at the Tri-County Mercantile, I asked there as well, what happened? All right, here's what happened. When you look at Chugwater, go north of Chugwater, which means across the highway, across the bluff, on the other side, is a ranch. Somebody decided to burn some trash. Yeah, if you're going, oh my God, right, this is not the time to burn trash. It is so incredibly dry out here. Some of those embers hit the hillside above the ranch, sparked up into the Chugwater Fire Department, which is funded by the Chugwater Chili Festival, by the way, which I am proud to say I get to host every year. Yes, I'm bragging. They ran out to put that out, but it got so out of control fast, went up and over the top of the bluffs. They could not get control of it. Just too much. They called in help, and that's when that fleet of airplanes flew in, like little bombers, and started dropping slurry ahead of the fire. At this point, Chugwater sees it coming down the other side of the bluff toward the town. They were able to stop the fire right at the interstate before it got into town. Not the time to burn trash. Coming up on 9:30, local news coming away after local news update on the weather forecast. You and I get back into it again. 888-97-WOODS. It's Wake Up Wyoming.
Want to talk to Glenn? Call 888-97-WOODS or chat him on the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app. This is AM 1030 K2 Radio.
9:36 the time, Wake Up Wyoming. Okay, we're getting a few more suggestions in here, which I kind of like the idea. We started something. I will write up an article about this, including musical examples. If you just missed it, Micah called in. We got into a discussion about there are some roads out there. You know, when you pull up to a stop sign and they have those rumbles in front of you, you know, and your tires go to let you know there's a stop sign there. Well, there's two highways in America that will tell you to drive a certain speed, and they put those rumbles out there so your car will play, your wheels, your tires will play a musical tune. And I said, we need some of those in Wyoming. So, for example, Miss Mary suggests that as you're heading into KC, Ned Ledoux's Cadillac Cowboy pulling into KC. I said, as you're driving, and I'm actually going to suggest this to Ogden Driscoll, his family, State Senator Ogden Driscoll's family owns a property around Devil's Tower. It has been since the first white guys moved out here. It's been in his family that entire time. I'm going to suggest that as they drive to Devil's Tower, it plays the theme for Close Encounters. So your tires are going ding, 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 like in Close Encounters. That would be just absolutely brilliant. Some of the other ones. Wild Pupper in Cheyenne and Pinedale says, play Windy on I-80 near Arlington. Oh, that would fit. Chet and Yoder wants to hear On the Road Again. That makes complete sense, too. So we could have some great tourist attractions if we just place those rumble strips in the right places. Personally, though, I'm a huge fan of the Close Encounters one, mainly because it's my idea. But no, Close Encounters, that's all you'd have to do approaching Devil's Tower. People would drive from all over. And they would shoot video of that and put it up on YouTube. Talk about more publicity for Devil's Tower. That would definitely do it. Now, try to imagine what kind of rumble strips you would have approaching the White House or the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Yeah, you could put up all sorts of music there. I would really like to see someone work on that. Okay. Steve in Cheyenne says, Willie Nelson's on the road again. You're with Chet and Roder, in Yoder. Yeah. On the road again, on some highway. I would think as soon as you cross into Wyoming on an interstate or some back highway, On the Road Again would play. But yeah, we could, that's not that expensive of a project. But of course, if we get our government to do it, such a simple project would end up costing millions. When it really shouldn't cost much at all to do something like that. All right, one more thing here. I got to commend this guy for doing this, but I don't think he went far enough. So with the elk fire, there was a gentleman who's with the fire department out there, the Forest Service, and he was trying to describe to an audience what fighting the fire is like. And he described it as, it's so out of control, he says, it's behaving, the fire is behaving like a teenager. Luckily for him, there weren't any teenagers in the room. They would have probably taken offense to that. I don't think he went far enough. The fire just keeps going in all sorts of different directions, and especially directions that fires don't normally go. They're used to fighting fires in certain ways because in some ways, mountain timber fires can be predictable, but this one has not been. That's why he's saying it's behaving like a teenager. Okay, you got to go farther than that. It's behaving like a teenage girl. See, I'll say that. You wouldn't have said that, pal, but I'll say that. Yeah, it's behaving like a toddler who just had an espresso and chocolate cake. How about that? You can do that. It's behaving like my ex-wife. Do that. Go ahead and say, if you're going to throw that out there, let's go with it. It's behaving like what? I like the idea of like a 13-year-old girl. That, to me, I think that's the best way possibly to describe it. An out-of-control fire that you cannot predict what it's going to do next. And it's throwing a fit in every possible direction. you can either do the 13-year-old girl, or if you like, a 13-year-old girl whose favorite band just broke up. Remember what 13-year-old girls were acting like when the Beatles broke up? For those who are old enough to remember. Or just say like a toddler on espresso and chocolate cake if you want to go do that. But I call that chickeny now. Chet and Yoder says, play Slow Ride. How about that's it, Low Rider. Yeah, I'd like to have a highway through one of our bigger, like here in Cheyenne, that plays the tune Low Rider as you're driving through. That would just be, totally cool. So yeah, there are, I'm going to start, and I'm serious about this. Next time I talk to Ogden Driscoll, I'm going to pitch him the idea of that rumble strip tune for Close Encounters of the Third Kind as you approach Devil's Tower. We'll start with there and see how far I can take this, how far we can take this. Coming up on 9:43, it's Wake Up Wyoming.
Listen to Glenn Woods anywhere you roam with the Wake Up Wyoming mobile app. This is AM 1030 K2 Radio.
Okay, off we go to talk to Frank Gambino. 9:47 the time. Wake Up Wyoming. We got to get Frank in on this conversation.
Glenn, first of all, where are you? Cheyenne, right?
I'm in Cheyenne, yeah.
You need to return immediately.
What happened?
That candy bowl is getting low.
Whose fault is that, Frank?
That's mine, and I want you to fill that bowl to the rim before you do anything else.
Yes, it'll be Monday.
Monday?
Yeah, of course, you guys have gone through 4 bags of candy already. You realize this.
Well,
but you, Frank, don't care because you don't get fat, do you?
No, not at all.
No, so what do you care about? But the rest of us.
I like free.
Okay. Well, I understand that. Yes, you will get more candy, but you'll have to wait till Monday. Okay, hang in there, Frank. And what are you going to do after Halloween?
No. See, that's even better. Glenn, you'll be able to go out and get candy that's on sale.
Oh, okay.
All that candy in the bags will be 50% off. It's the same thing after Valentine's Day, too.
Yes, yeah. I'm responsible for Frank's teeth rotting now. Anyway, here's what we're working on, Frank, and you can help us out on this.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with a caller about, there's there's 2 roads in America. You know the rumble strips when you pull up to a stop sign and let you know there's a stop sign there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there's 2 roads in America that if you slow down to the proper speed limit, your tires play a tune.
Really?
Yes. One of them is the William Tell Overture. So we thought, we need this for Wyoming. Now, Miss Mary has a good suggestion. As you pull into KC, Ned Ledoux's Cadillac Cowboy. That's my thought. Her thought. My thought is, as you're driving up the road to Devil's Tower, the theme for Close Encounters.
Yes.
Dun, 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 dun.
I don't understand the engineering of that.
You just got to put them in, if you're at the right speed, with the right spacing of the rumble strips, there you go.
Wow.
So let me see. Rick in Cheyenne wants to go deep, and Frank Zappa's Dynamo Hum. I don't know about that.
Frank Zappa, Frank Zappa. That'd almost be too hard to make rumble strips out of his stuff. It's very complicated.
Near LaGrange, Wyoming.
LaGrange?
ZZ Tops Highway 85.
Yep. That's a good one. Yep.
Okay. Play Windy on Highway 80 near Arlington. See, and these are some pretty good ideas out there. Someone also suggested On the Road Again. But I do like this one from Gaspar Farms, which is in Pine Bluffs. For crying out loud, let's fix the crappy roads. County Road 161 south of Pine Bluffs before we spend money on musical roads. Well, at least the potholes were in the right position. We could have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you can play drums.
Exactly right. So, get a good drum solo out of it. Yeah. So, anyway, if you come up with a good suggestion, let me know.
Let me get on the road again, and I'll find a spot.
That was a suggestion. On the road again was a suggestion, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as you're entering Wyoming, you hear On the Road Again by Willie Nelson on the interstate. Then you take off at 80 miles an hour.
There you go.
All right. Go with sports.
All right. High school football all over the place tonight and some tomorrow. But in Casper, it'll be the 60th annual Oil Bowl as Kelly Walsh will host Natrona. Both teams are 3-3 on the year. The last time Kelly Walsh won the Oil Bowl was back in 2016. That is a 6 p.m. start from the Harry Galdine Stadium. The Capital Bowl in Cheyenne tonight. Cheyenne East will host Cheyenne Central. East is 5-1. Central is 1-5. Laramie will also will be in Cheyenne to take on Cheyenne South. A win for Laramie really would solidify a playoff spot for them in 4A. And in Campbell County, in Gillette, Campbell County will take on Thunder Basin. Campbell County is 6-0, Thunder Basin 2-4. And Sheridan at 6-0 will take on Rock Springs at 3-3. They're going to have that game over at the Trona County High School in Casper at 6 p.m. due to all the smoke up in Sheridan. In 2A, Bighorn at 5-0 will be in Glen Rock, and the Herders are 0-6. Upton Sundance will be in Burns tonight. Upton Sundance is 2-2, and Burns is 3-3. In 9-man football, a pretty good game coming up tonight. Pine Bluffs against Saratoga with Pine Bluffs hosting. Both teams are 5-0. At 6 p.m. in 6-man football, Matitsi will take on KC this afternoon at 1 p.m. Matitsi's 3-1 on the year, and KC's at 1-4. And tonight at 6 p.m., Midwest will be at Riverside up in Basin. Riverside comes in at 3-2, and Midwest is 4-1. That'll be tonight at 6 p.m. In college football, the Wyoming Cowboys at home tomorrow at War Memorial Stadium to meet the Aztecs of San Diego State. The Cowboys did win their last game over the Air Force Academy. That was 2 weeks ago. Now the Pokes are coming off their bye, so they can look fresh and sharp after some time off, or they could look rusty, maybe even both in the same game. Cowboys have a lot of walking wounded in this game, so we'll see how they fare. But you know what? If you go out and force some turnovers and get some balanced offense and take care of the ball, you probably have a good chance to win. And you got to build on the momentum from that Air Force victory. This is a winnable game for the Cowboys, no doubt. Cowboys are only 2-point underdogs in the contest. That's a 1:30 start from War Memorial Stadium tomorrow. I'll have that for you on K2 Radio in Casper and KOWB in Laramie. In the baseball playoffs in the National League tonight will be the fifth and deciding game between San Diego and Los Angeles in the NL. In the American League yesterday, the New York Yankees defeated Kansas City 3-1 to win that best of 5 series 3-1. And Cleveland over Detroit 5-4 to stay alive in that series. That's even at 2 games apiece, and Game 5 of that series, the deciding game, will be tomorrow. It's in sports.
In Cheyenne suggests as you're driving toward Colorado, Highway to Hell plays by your car tires. That would be interesting. And Reefer, who's in Carpenter, Wyoming, said, driving in a pothole Laramie County, my car sounds like a hillbilly playing the spoons with a kazoo, warming up tap shoes.
Does somebody need some road work over there?
Yeah, and Wyoming Dave in Riverton, Wyoming, says, dead skunk in the middle of the road. That's actually a song.
Is it really?
Yes, it is. I'm saving these comments. I'm using them in the story.
Holy cow.
Frank, have a great weekend.
You too. I'll talk to you Monday. Bring candy.
With candy. I'll have candy, yes. Coming up on, he's going to lose all those teeth. Let's Wake Up Wyoming.
Now,